Hello guys and welcome back. Today is a big video, not just going over the prospect pools of every team, but the future of every NHL franchise. Today we're going to be going through every single team and their top U25 players and ranking them from 32 all the way to number 1. Which NHL teams have the best and the worst U25 cores? Well, today we're going to be breaking them all down with every single team dissected, so make sure you watch till the end for your team and all the rest of the league, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now again, I have to stress this is not about results and potential cups in the future. This is just about the pure players that are under 25 years old. That is the guideline. All players must be at least 24 years or younger to be qualified for this list. Now we're starting today's list off at number 32, and to me, when we combine the players on NHL rosters as well as the prospect pool, to me the team with the worst future in the league is actually the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, we're obviously just talking about U25 players, so every team is going to have some good qualities. And in Tampa's case, I think their forward group is pretty interesting. Connor Geekie, of course, is the main one. Could be on the roster this next year. You also got Dylan Duke, Nico Hutson, Jack Finley, and Isaac Howard as the top-end forwards. On the defensive side, it's a little bit thin. JJ Moser, to me, is the top-end player, but mostly as a minute eater on a potential middle pair for Tampa. You also got Roman Schmidt coming up, who I also think could just be a solid defensive bottom pair. And then Jan Golicic, who they got in this last draft, also projects the same way. On the goaltending side, Hugo Eniafelt was going to be the only option there, but he's going to be signed for the SHL this next year, and I don't even know if he's coming back to Tampa Bay's system. So if he leaves, they don't really have any goaltender that I think projects to the NHL in their system, and on top of a weak D-core, to me that leaves them in last place. Next up at 31, and the runner-up for last place, I got the New York Islanders. On the NHL roster forward-wise, Simon Holmstrom is really the only impact player, and he's more so a depth goal-scoring wing. You got Cole Eiserman, who will be a top-end power play piece, but that's really quite it, at least in terms of top-end players. You got Matthew Maggio, Jesse Nurmi, Camille Bednarik, Danny Nelson, Quinn Finley. A lot of guys that I think project well as bottom sixers for the Islanders, but nobody besides Eiserman who I think is going to be overwhelmingly good. You could make the case they have a decent defensive crop. You got Alexander Romanov on the NHL roster, as well as Jesse Pulkkinen from this last draft, and the duo of Kalle Odiolus and Isaiah George from the 2022 draft. But I think besides Pulkkinen, there's nobody there that also projects to be more than a bottom pair D in the prospects case. And I think defensively, they're also a bit thin on depth too. You also go to the goaltending side, where they ended up drafting two goalies from this last draft, in Dmitry Gazmin and Marcus Gidloff. And both of these guys, I think, are not going to be much more than backups, which is okay because you have Ilya Sorokin, but in terms of actual prospect futures, there's not a ton here that gets you all too excited besides Eiserman. Next, we go on to number 30, and I have the Colorado Avalanche in this spot. To me, it's mostly because of a lack of real depth. You have Nikolai Kovalenko is really the only big-time forward on the NHL roster now, and even he is a little bit of a question mark still. In the prospect pool, you got Callum Ritchie, who I think is a real highlight. You got Oscar Olofsson, Jean-Luc Foudy, William Zellers, Christian Humphreys. A lot of question marks outside of Ritchie that leave me in a weird spot with them. On the defensive side, Mikhail Gulyayev is a big standout to me. He's somebody that I think is actually the Avs' best prospect, and this last year in the KHL really got settled into a solid role. Sean Behrens as well, coming out of the University of Denver, I think will have a solid AHL campaign too. Torrey Pinder could also be a factor. He's somebody that they drafted in this last draft in the 6th round. A lot of development still to go, but he could maybe be a bottom pair D, but that's pretty much it. The goaltending side, though, is pretty spectacular. You got Justus Annunen still as a 24-year-old doing well now in the NHL level, but also the trio they got in the 2024 draft, Ilya Nabokov, Luka Cloutier, and Ivan Yunin. Three guys that I could see having NHL futures, and that really raises the pool for me. Now on to number 29, and here I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Their pool has increased a little bit since the 2024 draft, getting Rucker McGrody in exchange for Braden Yeager, who I think is the better prospect here. He'll be in the NHL this next year and playing a big role with Pittsburgh. On top of that, you got Tristan Braz, Tanner Howe, Mikhail Ilyin, who I think is one of the more underrated prospects out there, already adjusting pretty incredibly to the KHL level. And then the duo they got in a trade with the Canes, Cruz Lucius and Billy Koivunen, I think are two pretty underrated prospects as well. Their defensive side is solid to the top end, but I think kind of trails off after the top three. Owen Pickering, of course, is the big one. Still a lot of development to go with his size and the clunkiness that he has, but still some offense potential there. Harrison Brunicky, who they got in this last draft, solid as well, and Emil Piniemi, who they got in the 3rd round in 2023, also pretty solid too. It's interesting as well the goaltending side, because you got Joel Blomqvist, who's one of the better goaltending prospects in the NHL, developing really well well over in the AHL with Wilkes-Barre. He's someone with a 921 save percentage this last year as a big standout. You also got Sergei Murashov as well, a 4th rounder in 2022, who I think is progressing also pretty great. He's somebody I think to look out for, especially as he's in the AHL now too. Now to move on to number 28, I got the Boston Bruins, and they actually lift up a little bit because of the NHL players here. Matthew Poitras is a big one on the forward side, but you also got the prospects in Dean Letourneau and Fabian Liesel. Liesel especially, I want to see work. But you also got John Beecher on the NHL side, who worked out pretty well in these last playoffs and is starting to find a good role for himself in the bottom 6. But you also got Christopher Pelosi, Dan Zlakmelis, who I think is one of the more underrated prospects center-wise out there. You also got Oscar Jelvik as well from Boston College, playing really well over there. Defensively, though, I think is the main weakness here. Mason Lowry, to me, is the only U25 defenseman in the system that I think has a true NHL future. He has a pretty good one, but besides that, I don't think there's too much there. Good news is that the goaltending is quite solid, though, with Phillips feedback, playing solid with Providence, and Reed Dick as well, doing pretty good in the WHL and will continue to do so. Next up, we're going on to the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think you can start to see a steady increase in the pools here. With Vegas, forward-wise, I think it's a little bit weak at the top end. You got Pavel Dorofeyev, though I still love him, will mostly just be a solid bottom sixer, most likely third liner. You got Alexander Holtz, who they acquired from New Jersey, who could still be in the NHL, but needs to start getting it going here soon. You got Brendan Brisson, same thing with him. Trevor Connolly from this last draft, 19th overall, who is the highlight on the forward group, and Matthew Cataford, who I think is honestly pretty underrated for what he's been able to do. 40 goals this last year in the QMJHL. He's going to be somebody that could be quite solid in the future. On the defensive side, though, it's quite thin. You got Kane Korzak as more of a defensive D, Lucas Cormier on the offensive side, and then Artu Karki, who is just an absolute menace. This last year, a bunch of goals in the power play in the OHL, going back to the league, and we'll see how he develops. On the goaltending side, though, this is where I think the big strength of the prospect pool is. You got Carl Lindbaum, who I think is a top 10 goalie prospect in this league, Pavel Moisevich, who they got in the 3rd round in this last draft, and Cameron Whitehead. I could see all these guys being fringe NHL guys at the very least and potentially factoring into the lineup here. Now at number 26, we go into the Edmonton Oilers here, and you might be surprised to see them this high. We'll get into why in a second here. It's not really because of the forward side. It's pretty trash. Vasily Podkolzin is the only impact NHLer below 25 years old on the roster right now. But on the prospect pool, you got Matthew Savoy, you got Matvei Petrov, Robbie Arventi. I do like Sam O'Reilly as well. He could factor into a middle 6. But the real reason they're this high is because Evan Bouchard is still under 25 years old. Now, only for like another month, but the fact that Evan Bouchard is still 24 raises it quite a bit. We know how impactful he's been offensively for the Oilers, already being one of the top offensive D in the league. You also got Ty Emberson as well, still under 24, who I think is really underrated defensively. And in the prospect pool, you got Bo Akey and Nikita Yevseyev, who I think is pretty underrated there too. And on the goaltending side, Emil Vinny, who I thought was the best goaltending prospect in this last draft, getting him 64th overall is fantastic. And Olivier Rodrigue, I don't think is somebody that we should underrate yet. He's still 24 years old, but progressing well in the AHL and could factor in as a backup someday. Next up, number 25, we got the Winnipeg Jets, who I think fall down here because of the lack of depth and also not a ton of NHL talent right now. Cole Perfetti is really the only big one, and he isn't even signed right now, so who knows what happens next. But you got Brayden Yager, who I think decreased their prospect pool a little bit compared to McGrody, but you also got Brad Lambert still there, Colby Barlow, Chaz Lucius, we'll see if he can stay healthy, and Nikita Chibrikov as well. Defensively, I like the top 2 guys in Elias Salomonsson and Alphonse Frey, but Ville Heinola is still a question mark right now if he'll even play, and there's no other guys I think in the core that will play NHL games. On the goaltending side, Tomas Milic has been a nice find as a 5th rounder. He's somebody that since the World Juniors has played pretty well, and we'll see him hopefully as a full-time starter or at least goalie in the AHL this next year, but you can see the depth is rather weak compared to most teams. Next up, we go into the Toronto Maple Leafs, who I think have some okay standouts, but mostly solid depth. The standouts, of course, being Nyes and Easton Cowan. Outside of that in the 4 group, some guys I think will be fixtures in the bottom 6. Fraser Minton, Nikita Grebyankin. You also got Ronnie Hervinen and Nicholas Moldenhauer. Defensively, Ben Danford, I think, is the top end, but he's mostly going to be probably a 4th defenseman at the NHL level. Toppy Nemula could still factor in. And Noah Chadwick, I'm going to bang the drum whenever I can. One of the more underrated defensive prospects out there. He's somebody that with Lethbridge has really developed well, and I am really excited to see what he becomes. And on the goaltending side, Artur Akimov is somebody that coming over to the AHL is going to be really interesting, and Dennis Hildeby has been a consistent force for the Marlies over these last couple of seasons, and hopefully will continue to grow too. Next up, we go to the Florida Panthers, who I think have been one of the more underrated cores in the NHL. You got Anton Lundell leading the way on forward. He's somebody that's been really underrated for the Panthers these past couple of years, a consistent playoff performer as well. You also got Mackie Simaskevich, Justin Sordiv, Sandis Vilmanis, Linus Eriksson, who I think projects as a solid bottom six center, Grayson Sachin, and Jack Devine, who's been really underrated with Denver these past couple of years, a production machine. On the defensive side, you got Adam Boquist as a top D on the NHL team. You got Merrick Alsher, Matvey Sherbin as well, and underratedly, Luka Janssen, who has really played a lot of minutes already in the SHL. He's somebody that with that young age, already playing at a pro level, shows a lot of promise there. And on the goaltending side, Spencer Knight, of course, leads the way there too. I think it's propelled by the depth and especially the top end on the forward side, but I think just has a good mix in every position here. Now on to number 22, and a core that is fascinating to look at in the Nashville Predators. They are decreased a little bit because of the Askarov trade, but still on the forward side, it's looking quite rich. You got Luke Evangelista, Philip Tomasino, and Juuso Parson as the NHL pieces. But outside of that, you got Fyodor Svechkov, you got David Edstrom, who hopefully won't be traded again. You also got Joaquin Kamel, Zachary LaRue, Reed Schaefer, Igor Shurin, and Teddy Stika from this last draft, on top of Matthew Wood and Aiden Fink from 2023. Defensively and goaltending-wise, they're a little bit more thin. Ryan Ufko, I think, is the top end on the defensive side, along with Tanner Molendijk. You also got Anton Olsen there, and I would say their best goalie prospect now is Juho Jokela, who is now kind of in a position with Askarov gone to maybe be a backup, but hasn't put up the best numbers in the Liga, but we'll see what happens. Now going to the last team outside the top 20, we have the LA Kings here, and when you take into account all the NHL players as well, I think it's a pretty decent core. Nothing insane like it was a couple of years ago, but still some pretty great pieces. Quinton Byfield, of course, is the main one of the four group, really progressing well now, and one of the few prospects that has actually developed in a strong way. You also got Alex Lafayette there as well in the NHL core. You got both Alex Turcotte and Arthur Kalliev from the 2019 draft, who are kind of in no man's land right now. Hopefully Turcotte can finally start finding some health here with LA, and hopefully it's able to secure him a position on the bottom six. Outside of that, you got Liam Greentree, who they got 26th overall, a solid middle six piece coming up. They got Cohen Zemer, Francesco Pinelli, Samuel Helenius, Jack Hughes as well. Defensively, I think they're pretty underrated. Brant Clark, of course, is the big one. We also got Jordan Spence, who has been kind of misused, I think, so far, but when he has been played, he's put up some pretty good offensive numbers. You got Yaka Dvorak as a physical D, Matthew Mania, Otto Salen, and Kirill Kursanov, both I think are underrated overseas D, especially in Kursanov's case. He's somebody that's already playing pretty good minutes in the KHL, especially to start out this year at 21 years old. And on the goaltending side, Eric Portillo is the main one acquired from Buffalo. He's been really progressing well in the AHL. Hampton Slakinski is somebody that I think has been one of the most underrated goalies over the past couple of years. He put up some massive numbers in the USHL this last year, 28-3-0 record going to Western Michigan. It's going to be really interesting there. You also got Carter George as well from this last draft, who is an impeccable add too, and overall just a very balanced and compact and solid pool in all three positions. Now before we get into the top 20, I first want to talk about today's sponsor in BetUS. They're actually offering a new promotion. Before it was 125% sign-up bonus, now it's an 150% sign-up bonus on your first three deposits up to $2,000. And of course, with the NHL season coming up here, folks, it is the best place to make your picks for the season and throughout the season with all the daily games coming up, especially now with the KHL and other leagues coming up too. They'll have options there as well. You can go for the Stanley Cup winners before the season, and you can go for the awards as well for everything. You can go for the Hart Trophy. You can go for the Jack Adams. If you're feeling a specific coach like a Sheldon Keefe for the Jack Adams this year, then by all means, you have the power with BetUS, and thank you to BetUS for sponsoring today's video. Now, starting us out inside the top 20 is actually the St. Louis Blues. Still weird to think that Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg are both Blues now, but of course, Dylan Holloway on the NHL roster leads the way with Jake Neighbors as well as a core piece. You also got Dallas Rudavorsky in the prospect pool, Jimmy Snuggerud, Otto Stenberg. You got a really underrated one here in Yuri Pekarsik, who I think in the USHL was just brilliant as a playmaker this last year. Heading to the QMJHL, we'll see how that goes. But you also got Adam Yeko from this last draft. Alexandre Kaskamaki has really developed well over in the Liga this last year, 10 goals, 17 points in 48 games. On the NHL side, defensively, you got Philip Broberg, but of course in the system, you got Theo Lindstein, you got Adam Juracek, Michael Butchinger, you got got Lucas Fischer, and goaltending-wise, Joel Hofer and Vadim Zarenko are both pretty quality players, especially Hofer, who I've been a big fan of for a while, and is starting to develop well as a backup to Binnington. Now we move on to the New York Rangers, and number 19, that is where they'll go. You, of course, have on the forward group Alexei Lafreniere and Capo Caco, who, even though they are these generational franchise players, are still useful, especially in Lafreniere's case. You got Will Cooley as well in the NHL roster, as well as, of course, Matt Rempe. But on the prospect side, you got Gabe Pro, who's going to be a stud for them. Brody Lamb as well for the University of Minnesota has really gotten better, rebounded in a big way. You got Brendan Oppman, of course, still there. You got Brett Berard, who I think is really underrated. Huge AHL season. Love to see it. You also got Ryder Korzak, Adam Sikora as well. And on the defensive side, you got Keandre Miller. Definitely boosted that he's still 24 years old. But you also got Zach Jones, EJ Emery, who's going to be a force. Drew Fortescue, who's really underrated as a defensive D. And on the goaltending side, Dylan Garand, who I don't think is anything crazy, but has been okay in the AHL these past couple of years. Still finding his way, but I think eventually will be a solid fringe guy behind Shesterkin. Next up, we got the Washington Capitals, who are about middle of the pack in the prospect pool and also keep around the middle of the pack here. You got on the forward side in the NHL, Connor McMichael, Hendrix Lapierre, and Alexei Protas. But on the prospect side, Ryan Leonard is going to be an absolute beast. Tarek Parasak is going to be a dog on the bottom six. Ivan Miroshchenko there. Andrew Crystal brings some offense on top of Ilya Protas. And on the defensive side, you got Rasmus Sandin there, Martin Fehervary, who both at 24 years old play different roles, but are both equally impactful, especially Fehervary, who has been really underrated for the Caps. You got Vincent Ioro, Ryan Chesley, Brent Johnson, Leon Mugli, Cole Hutson. And on the goaltending side, Nicholas Kemp was an underrated add in the 4th rounder this last year, and Anton Keller in the 7th rounder is developing decently too. Next up at number 17, this is where I have the Calgary Flames, and I don't think this is a bad spot for them whatsoever, considering they don't have too much on the NHL roster yet. A lot of teams that do have NHL guys are ahead of them, but still you got Connor Zary on the NHL roster, who has really progressed well as a solid second, maybe even first line scorer for them for the future. You got Jacob Pelche, who hopefully will be in the NHL full-time this next year. You got Martin Pospisil, who was really underrated in a kind of physical scoring role last year for Calgary. We'll see how much he's able to develop there. You also got Matt Coronado, Samuel Hanzik, William Stromgren, who struggled really out of the gates once he was drafted, but this last year started getting going a little bit in the AHL, and that's really good news for the Flames. You got Matvei Greden, Andrew Basha, Luke Misa, that trio from the 2024 draft, all guys who I think have good potential, and also Idar Suniev doing well at UMass too. You also got on the defensive side Kevin Ball on the NHL roster, but then you got Zane Perek, Henry Mews, Hunter Bustevitz, Etienne Morin, you got Jeremy Poirier, Artem Grushnikov, a lot of good D there. And the goaltending is pretty good too. Dustin Wolf is a top end one, and then you also got Arseny Sergeyev, who is now going to Penn State, but pretty good years with UConn in the NCAA. And you also got Kirill Zarubin, who they got in the 3rd round in 2024. He's progressing well in the NHL, put up some massive numbers there last year, and we'll see how he does. Now going on to number 16, next up it is Philly's turn, and we started, of course, with Matvei Michkov. You also got Joel Verby, Bobby Brink on the NHL roster on top of Tyson Forrester. Those 4 guys are going to be pretty critical for the Flyers. You also got Jet Luchenko, who is getting pretty overhated. Yes, I don't think a lot of people would have had 13th overall, but I didn't have him too far behind. You also got Denver Barkey, Samuel Tumala, who kind of in a similar situation as William Stromgren, kind of was weird out of the gate after he was drafted, but this last year was able to put up some pretty good numbers in the AHL. You also got Alex Siernik doing well over in Sweden, and Devin Kaplan, who I think in the NCAA is also progressing well too. On the defensive side, you got Jamie Drysdale, Cam York, Emil Andre, Oliver Bonk. You also got Spencer Gill as a physical defenseman there. And on the goaltending side, Samuel Urson, just 24 years old, but still counts. And you also got Carson Bjornsson and Igor Zaravkin from last year's draft. I think the big weakness, though, is top-end players besides Matvei Michkov, which really makes the Cutter Gauthier trade hurt. But still, for the Flyers, they got a lot of good other options that will fill out that lineup. Next up at number 15, and this might be another huge surprise. The Vancouver Canucks come here at 15th overall, and when you look at the forward side of things, it's pretty surprising. You got Nils Hoglander as the main NHL piece, then you got Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Atu Ratu, and then maybe Riley Patterson and Anthony Romani could be NHLers. It's quite thin on the forward side, but then you look at the defense and, well, it's all making a lot more sense, does it? Yeah, Quinn Hughes is still 24 years old, so in doing a U25 ranking, Hughes still counts here, which really propels it up maybe like 10 spots, honestly. But I think the defensive core in general is pretty underrated. You got Tom Willander as an 11th overall pick, Duma Misa Elias Pettersson on the back end, Sawyer Minio, really underrated defensive D. You also got Kirill Kudryavtsev, who in the OHL has done some pretty good things over the past few years. And on the goaltending side, Artur Shilovs is looking like a solid goaltender right behind Thatcher Demko, and Ty Young has shown some decent promise since getting drafted in the WHL too. So when you factor in Shilovs, when you factor in Quinn Hughes, the defensive group there, it ain't too bad. Another team that definitely gets boosted by the fact that this isn't just a prospect pool ranking, it's a U25 ranking, is my favorite team of the Dallas Stars, who come in here at number 14. You of course have Wyatt Johnston as the main one, absolutely killing it with the Stars. Fantastic playoffs, great regular season, will continue to grow there. You also got of course Logan Stanko and Maverick Bork, my two boys, but also Emil Hemming and potentially Matthew Semenov, who has improved on his skating. Didn't have the greatest rookie season in the AHL, but I mean, can improve upon that. Defensively, you got Thomas Harley also included in this list, which is huge as a puck-moving D. You got Nils Lundqvist, Liam Bixell, Tristan Bertucci, Christian Kyrou, and Aram Minidian. Also, Gavin White, I wouldn't rule out as an NHL future. He's somebody that's slowly developed, but has been under the radar, had a pretty solid defensive rookie season in the AHL. Could be something more than that. On the goaltending side, there's not much. You got Arno Tefanasi, who back in the DEL has put up some decent numbers there, and potentially Maxi Mayarov, who's still in the MHL, but looking okay there, big size, and we'll see if that turns into something. But because of Harley, because of Johnston, it really does raise the Star stock. Now we're getting into the good stuff here, folks. At 13th overall, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, another team that is boosted by the U25 rule here. Andrei Svechnikov still counts for this list. I feel like he's been in the league forever, but he's still only 24 years old. You also got Sev Jarvis, who is a huge boost as well. You got Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Jack Jury on the NHL roster. Then for prospects, you got Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, Greg Lebtrikosov, Felix Sorum, Nikita Artamonov, Jaden Perron, Alexander Rykov, Tamir Mukanov. You got so many different forwards that create so much depth for this Hurricanes team coming up. I mean, Carolina has always had such good depth in their prospect pool, and they will continue to have that. On the defensive side, you got Alexander Nikishin, Scott Morrow, Dominic Badinka, you got Alexei Hemiosalmi, you got Vladimir Grudinin, you also got Charles Alexei Legault, who I think is a pretty underrated one for the Canes, 5th rounder back in 2023, big overager, but he was pretty huge for Quinnipiac this last year, and we'll see what he does in the AHL perhaps. You also got Patrick Harmala and Ruslan Kanayev on the goaltending side. I would say the goaltending is fairly weak, and that's a pretty big weakness, but man, the top end forwards there are pretty fantastic, and the just depth of the prospect pool is impeccable. Now we go on to the Seattle Kraken, who just have so many good names coming up. Center-wise alone, you got Matty Beniers, Shane Wright, and Berkly Catton, which is just unfair. For the rest of the prospect pool, you got Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, you got Carson Rakoff, Edward Chalet, Jagger Furcus, David Goyette, Yanni Nyman, Ryan Winterton, Julius Mettinen, Ollie Josephson, my boy. So many of my fan favorites have been drafted by Seattle, and you love to see that. On the defensive side, you got Riker Evans, Ty Nelson, Caden Price, Lucas Dragicevic, Tyson Jugnoff, Billy Ottavinin. So many good offensive D for Seattle coming up. And goaltending-wise, they got a good Finnish duo coming up here, Nicholas Kokko and Kim Sarainen. Two guys that I liked quite a bit. Sarainen especially, one of my top goalie prospects from this last draft. He's somebody to really watch out for. But just all around, there's not many holes in this prospect pool for Seattle. I would say maybe they're lacking a top-end D on the defensive, pure defensive side maybe, but that's about it. Which honestly just shows how insane these cores are getting up to this point in the top 15. All of these teams have great futures, and we're just splitting hairs at this point. Next up, we're going just outside the top 10 here, and next up, I got the Utah Hockey Club, who have a great prospect pool and a good core coming up here. On the forward side of the NHL, you already got Matthias Michelli, Jack McBain, Josh Doan, Dylan Gunther, and of course, Logan Cooley. But the prospect pool is also wicked. Anil Boot is so good. TJ Ginla is so good. You got Cole Baudouin, Michael Kessingring on the defensive side. I think it's been a really underrated ad for the Yotes and now for Utah. You also got Dmitry Simashev, Maverick Lamoureux, Will Skahan, and on the goaltending side, I think they're pretty underrated here in Michael Robel and Melker Thielen. Thielen especially got a nod for the U20 World Juniors for the Swedes. I think he's somebody that's really been doing solid in Sweden so far. I hopefully will see him in full-time role with the Allsvenskan this next year, but I think for the Yotes, they're pretty balanced overall. I think the one big weakness is maybe defensive depth, but I think the guys they have there are pretty good, especially Simashev. But now we move on to the biggest difference between prospect pool and U25 rankings. We have the Ottawa Senators here, a team that prospect pool-wise would maybe be in the mid 20s for me right now. They jump all the way into the top 10, and for very good reason. It's because a lot of their prospects have graduated, and honestly, respect to them. A lot of them have turned out in a pretty good way. You got Tim Stützle, of course, in the forward group there with Brady Tkachuk, Shane Pinto, Ridley Gregg, and even Zach Oshachuk, who will maybe be in the NHL this next year. We'll have to wait and see on that. But in the prospect pool, you got Stephen Holiday there, you got Tyler Boucher, you got Xavier Gabargo, you got Blake Montgomery, who I liked from this last draft, Oscar Peterson as well from 2022. On the defensive side, Jake Sanderson, huge one there, Tyler Clevin as well. You also got Carter Yakimchuk, Jorian Donovan, who I really do like. You got Hoyt Stanley there too. And goaltending wise, the duo here in Levi Marilainen and Kevin Riedler for the future, I think is pretty underrated. You could have also have Matt Zugard here, but he's still a bit of a wait and see for me. Overall though, a huge jump for the Sens because they're NHL players like Stützle, like Tkachuk, like Sanderson, and it's a pretty good reason to jump, honestly. Now moving on to number 9. Next up, I have the Minnesota Wild here, a team with a great prospect pool and a good core coming up. On the forward side, Matt Boldy counting is huge for them. He has grown so much over the past few years into a massive offensive piece for the Wild. You got Marat Kuzadinov, Marco Rossi, Riley Heidt, Rasmus Kumpalainen, Liam Ogren, and Daniil Yurov from the 2022 draft. Two huge players there. Ryder Ritchie and also Ryder Lorenz, I think is a pretty underrated physical player the Wild have drafted back in 2022. Big jump for Denver, and he'll continue to jump as well there. Defensively, Brock Faber leads the way on the NHL roster now. Big time top end D chip on top of Zebium, who is going to be another top end D chip. You also got Carson Lambos, David Spacek, Part as well, and Aaron Kiviharju. On the goaltending side, Jesper Wallstedt is all they need. Best goalie prospect in the NHL, also is a big boost for them. Now at number 8, another team really propelled by their top end players. We got the New Jersey Devils here. Jack Hughes, one of the best up and coming players in the NHL, is a huge one here. 99 points last year. Took a little bit of a step back, but will still be fantastic. You also got Dawson Mercer as well as a critical younger piece there too. I do think it kind of falls off a little bit after Lenny Hamanaho on the prospect pool. You got Herman Trav, Samu Salminen, Arseny Gritsuk I think is really underrated, has been fantastic. Whenever I watched SKA, was great when I was watching Ivan Demidov too, and he's going to be a good one. But outside of that, forward wise, I think the depth is a little bit lacking. The defense more than makes up for that though. Simone Nemetz, Luke Hughes, Seamus Casey, Anton Silayev. That top 4 coming up is maybe the best young top 4 in the entire league right now. You also got Tobias Wieland, who I think is also a kind of under the radar chip. He's somebody that in the AHL did some pretty good things last year of Utica. And on the goaltending side, Nico Dawes is okay. And Mikhail Yegorov in the second round isn't horrible. Not where I would have chosen him, but he's somebody that going to Boston University here soon has some potential with the big size he presents. Now we're getting to the cores where there are so many tabs open for these players that my computer is starting to get overwhelmed. At number 7, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets. You got already on the forward group Adam Fantilli, Kent Johnson, Kirill Marchenko, Cole Sillinger, Igor Chinnikov, Dmitry Voronkov. So many good players already on the roster, but coming up you got Kane Lindstrom, William Whitelaw, Gavin Brindley, James Malatesta, Luca Del Belbaluz, who's really adapted much better to the AHL than I expected him to do already. You got Jordan Dumais, Luca Pinelli, and on the defensive side, David Juracek, Jordan Harris, who they got in the Line A trade, really underrated IQ-driven defenseman here. You got Denson Matejchuk, Coruscant Kuhlman, Stanislas Vozil, Samuel Nazco, Charlie Ellick, Luca Morelli, Andrew Strafman. And on the goaltending side, I really like Evan Gardner, and Sergei Ivanov is one of the better goaltending prospects in the entire NHL. Definitely top 15, right up there, and now in the KHL full-time again. Next up, just outside the top 5 is where I have the Detroit Red Wings. You got Lucas Raymond as the top end forward. You got Jonathan Berggren, who hopefully with Raymond will get signed eventually. But outside of that, you got Michael Brandsegg-Nygard from this last draft, Nate Danielson, Marco Kasper, Carter Mazer, Amadeus Lombardi, Dmitry Bolchinikov, Theodor Niederbach, now Noah Dower Nilsson, Max Plant, Andre Becker. There's a lot of great overall talents here, and you have some good offensive pieces, obviously, like Lucas Raymond, and in the prospect pool, players like Nate Danielson, and especially Dmitry Bolchinikov. A lot of great overall players, though, that can fit in a lot of different roles, and I think that'll be really handy for Detroit in the future. Defensively, top end-wise, you got so many good qualities in Moritz Seider, in Axel Sandin Palika, Simone Edvinsson, three great top end D there. You got William Willander and Shai Buum, who I think will both factor in potentially do a bottom pair. And then goaltending wise, Trey Augustine and Sebastian Cossa, potentially the best tandem going in the future in the league. And Detroit, that is a big bonus for them coming up. The goaltending has been a bit of a struggle, but once these guys are full-time NHLers, I doubt it will be. But now we're officially into the top top 5 youth cores in the NHL. And at number 5, we're going to go into the Anaheim Ducks, a team with so much high-end quality talent coming up. You got Trevor Zegras already, Cutter Gauthier, Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, Beckett Seneca, a top 5 to die for. I do think the depth forward-wise thins a little bit after that. Nathan Gaucher, Sasha Pashchev, Kerry Terrence, Nico Mijatovic, Lucas Pettersson, Maxim Messe, I think will be pretty solid for them, but nothing more than just decent. On the defensive side, though, it goes right back up to the top with Pavel Mintyukov, Olin Zellweger, Stein Solberg, who was some much-needed bulk to that defensive side. You got Tristan Leno there, Noah Ward, and Terrence Smith, who's going to be so much fun on that Anaheim defense. And the goaltending is quite solid, too. Lucas Dostal, I'm a big fan of. You also got Damian Clare there, and Thomas Sukanek, who, even though he has had a big injury, I think it's like 8 months or something, I'm still a believer in him potentially being an NHLer in the future, and I've been a big believer in him for a while here. But this Ducks pool is just insane, especially with Gauthier coming into the fold this next year. It is going to be nuts. Now on to number 4, and a core that you just have to love in the Buffalo Sabres. Throw out any questions in the making the playoffs, whatever it is. The youth core is insane here for the Sabres in terms of NHL players already and the players they have coming up. On the forward group, you got Dylan Cousins, Zach Benson, Jack Quinn, JJ Peterka, Ryan McLeod already on the roster. Then you got Yuri Kulich, Isaac Rosen, Noah Ostlund, Anton Wahlberg, Victor Nuchev, Brody Zemer coming up. And you also got on the defensive side, Rasmus Dahlin, who is still under 25 years old. Like Svechkov is insane that he's not already 32. You got Owen Power, Matthias Samuelsson. You also got Ryan Johnson. You got Vladislav Komarov. You got Maxim Sturbach, Adam Kleber, Luke Osborne. A lot of interesting options on those bottom pairs. And then the goaltending is quite solid here. You got Devon Levi, you got Ryerson Leanders, Scott Raslav, Tobias Leeninen. A lot of options there for the goaltending coming up here. But every single position has top-end players, has good depth, it has just solid qualities all around, and it is a great future for Buffalo. And hopefully they're finally able to capitalize on it. Now we're into the top 3, and next up we're on to the Montreal Canadiens, and it's sad that Nick Suzuki has aged out of it, or else they could be even higher perhaps, but the Habs still have one of the best futures in the NHL, one of the best prospect pools out there. You of course now include Cole Caulfield, Kirby Dach, Alex Newhook, Yuri Slavkovsky, Joshua Waugh, now back a part of this group, on top of Ivan Demidov, Oliver Kapanen, who's taken big strides, Sean Farrell, Philip Mishar, Owen Beck, Michael Hage is a big one, Adus Koivu, Philip Eriksson, who's looking like a fantastic pick from the 6th round last year, already developing well over in the Allsvenskan. Great numbers there. You also got on the defensive side, David Reinbacher, Lane Hutson, Jane Struble, Kane Gooley, Arbor Xhekaj, Adam Engstrom, Logan Mailloux, Bogdan Konyashov. And on the goaltending side, Jacob Fowler, my goats, and also Yevgeny Volokhin, who I think was a really underrated pick in the 5th round back in 2023, doing well over in Russia already. There's just so few little holes in this prospect pool. It's so balanced. It's so competitive. You have so many different playing styles and sizes and structures, and I think it's going to come together so well in the future. It is already starting to for Montreal, but it is going to be a sick core coming up here for the Habs. But now we go to the runner-up here at 2nd overall, and next up, I have to go with the San Jose Sharks. To me, one of the cleanest futures in the NHL, and it's going to get better as well as San Jose continues to tank. But on the forward side, you got Macklin, Celebrini, Will Smith, William Eklund, Igor Chernyshov, Philip Byston, Christian Musty, Colin Graf, Dylan Olgustian, Carson Wedge, Casper Holton, and Cameron Lund. So many different options there. I do think they could use another top-end forward, even somebody else to continue that, but the top end is already great there. Defensively, Henry Thrun on the NHL roster already has been solid. You got Sam Dickinson, Luka Cagnoni, Shakir McAmadulin, Jack Thompson, Jake Furlong, Eric Polkamp. You also got Matthias Havelid. You got Leo Helenius. You got Colton Roberts. I think the depth, especially over the past couple of years defensively, has really taken a big step for San Jose. They got a lot of good, solid depth D coming up, especially on the defensive side. They're going to be quite solid. And also on the goaltending side now, you got Yaroslav Askarov and Christian Kirsch. Now that Askarov is there, I don't think there's any true hole for this Sharks team. I think they have all of these different check marks boxed out. And now I think even though they will get another top end forward, potentially another top end D, I still think there is a great core coming up. Even if they didn't have any other drafts to go, you have a fantastic youth core here for San Jose. And somewhat of a winner, I think. I think there's going to be so much potential in this squad, and I just hope they're able to utilize it and capture it, and hopefully win the first Stanley Cup in Sharks history. But some team has to be number one, and coming up at the number one spot, I have the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, sure, is this really affected by Connor Bedard? Absolutely, but it's Connor Bedard. He is the next generational face in the league, and Bedard is really going to raise it quite a bit. But I do think what the Blackhawks have coming up is more than just Bedard. On the forward side, you got Philipp Kurashev and Lucas Reichel in the NHL right now. We also got Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore, Sasha Boisvert, Marek Vanacker, John Mustard, Roman Kantsarov, who I think is really getting underrated here. You got Martin Misiak, Nick Lardis, Colton Dock. You got Landon Slaggert as well, and Paul Ludwinski. I think there's a little bit of a weakness in terms of top-end guys besides Bedard. I think they could use another top-end wing like a Porter Martone from this next draft, but I think for the Blackhawks, they'll still be in a good position to get that. Defensively, though, they got Kevin Korchinski, you got Artyom Levshunov, Alex Vlasic, Wyatt Kaiser, you got Ethan Del Mastro, Nolan Allen, you got Sam Renzel as well, and I think they could also use another top 4D, but I think there's also time for that for Chicago. They still got a long runway here, but I think considering the top end in each position, you got some great pieces coming up. And on the goaltending side, Drew Commesso and Adam Gajan both have a lot of potential. I think Commesso is most likely to be the starter there and be a pretty solid one, and maybe Chicago wants to go after a more elite goaltender in the end. But I think considering Bedard and the assets you have around him, the defensive pieces you have coming up, and the depth you have for the roster, there are so many good players here, and players that'll fill so many different roles. I mean, you got guys like Kantsarov who can be great goal scorers on the bottom six, but also players like Boisvert and Vanacker who can be such perfect players and versatile guys for the lineup that I think will complement the top end guys so well. Once Chicago goes through another great draft, I think they're in for a spectacular era in their franchise. But that's gonna be it for me today, guys. I've been recording for 2 hours, so I really hope you did enjoy. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Comment down below all your thoughts on my rankings and where you think your team's core should place as well. Of course, should have been with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Click on this card for all my hockey prospects talk in one playlist, and make sure you go up and sign up to Bet US today, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great hockey day, y'all, and goodbye.